The release of Caverns of Ixalan brings with it 4 new Commander Precon decks, each focusing on a specific creature type. We have a dinosaur deck, a vampire deck, a merfolk deck, and a pirate deck. In this video, I'll be breaking down one of the 4 deck lists for you, giving you an in-depth look at some of the new legendary creatures, the new cards, the better reprints, and then a budget-friendly guide on upgrading each of these decks. Without further ado, let's begin. In this video, we will be discussing the Ahoy Mateys deck, a blue, black, and red deck centered around pirates and reanimation. Arr! So without further ado, let's meet our cover commander, Admiral Brass Unsinkable. She's a 3/3 human pirate for 5 mana, broken down to 2 of any color and then 1 each of blue, black, and red. When she enters the battlefield, mill 4 cards. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may return target pirate creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with the finality counter on it. It gains haste until the end of turn. Finality counters are a new mechanic from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan and are relevant to reanimation strategies. A creature with a finality counter on it gets exiled when it dies, rather than it going to the graveyard. This is in part designed to curb some over-enthusiastic reanimation strategies. Now, Admiral Bass is very powerful in that she lets you reuse your pirate creatures once more after they've gone to Davy Jones's locker. It also makes them stronger and it gives them haste, both of which can result in some powerful tempo swings. We also have a few alternate commanders that we can use. The original Admiral Beckett Brass is here, costing 4 mana for a 3/3 human pirate who gives all of your other pirates 1/1. At the beginning of your end step, you gain control of a target non-land permanent controlled by a player who has dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates this turn. This is a very fun theft deck, letting you swing in wide with your pirates to steal your opponent's cards, and while this is a very fun commander in their own right, I actually want to stick with the new Admiral Brass for this video. We also have Don Andres the Renegade, a 4 mana 4/3 vampire pirate. Each creature you control, but don't own, gets +2/+2, has menace and death touch, and is a pirate in addition to its other types. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell that you don't own, you create 2 tapped treasure tokens. First of all, this is very synergistic and inspired with the theft mechanic, giving you value depending on what kind of card that you've stolen. Considering everything that isn't a creature spell is considered a trigger met for the second ability, we are going to net a ton of treasure, even if it does have to enter the battlefield tapped. So now that we met our commander options, let's take a look at the best new cards from this deck. Enterprising Scallywag is a 2/2 goblin pirate for 2 mana, and at the beginning of our end step, if you've descended this turn, you create a treasure token. So to begin, to descend is to have a permanent card get put in your graveyard from anywhere during this turn. Our deck has a couple of ways of putting things into graveyards, either by milling ourselves or having our pirate creatures die. Either way, this will more than likely give us a treasure token every turn. Francisco Foul Marauder is once again us power creeping Stormcrow, but now he's a pirate. Arr. This 0/1 with flying can't block. Whenever 1 or more pirates you control deal combat damage to a player, Francisco explores. To explore, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can add it to your hand, and if it isn't, you can put that card back on top of your library or into the graveyard, and then put a +1/+1 counter onto Francisco. So this does everything for the deck. You need it to only connect with 1 point of combat damage, likely not right off the bat from our little friend here, to really get the ball moving. You want to put that first +1/+1 counter onto Francisco because then you can put that card into your graveyard, and then Francisco can start triggering his own abilities. Our commander can always revive whatever card we ditch later on if it's a creature card, and so this synergizes phenomenally with our strategy. Gemcutter Buccaneer is a 1/3 for 4 mana. Whenever it or another pirate enters the battlefield under our control, we create a tapped treasure token. In addition, treasure tokens are considered equipments in addition to their other type, and that give +2/+0. They equip to pirates for 1 mana and to non-pirates for 3. We don't really care about the 3 mana, we're going to be using the 1. This gives additional relevance to the tapped treasures as they can be simply used for equipment until the following turn when they untap and can be used normally. I also really like that this gives a very flavorful utility to our treasure tokens in a pirate-themed deck. Skeleton Crew is perhaps my favorite card in the deck because I wish skeletons got so much more love. We got zombie love, where's skeleton love? I guess this is a start. Each other creature you control that's either a skeleton or a pirate gets +1/+1. Whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, you create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. You can also pay 5 and 1 black to return the skeleton crew from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So first of all, this is a lord for our pirates that can keep coming back. In addition, we can technically create 2/2 skeleton pirates, which the pirate side will trigger the aforementioned gem cutter buccaneer. Even more so because they are both skeletons and pirates, those tokens will get +1/+1, so there'll be 3/3 skeleton pirates. That's a super powerful token to add to a reanimator strategy. The Grim Captain's Locker might be my new favorite card for self-milled decks. This is a play obviously on Davy Jones's Locker from Real World Pirate Mythos, and is a legendary artifact for 4 mana that can tap to Surveil 1. Surveil lets you look at the top card of your library, and if you wish, you can put it into your graveyard. You can also tap it to give each creature card in your graveyard escape for 4 mana and exile 4 other cards from your graveyard. We know the power level that escape as a mechanic has, as we've seen with Underworld Breach. Having this on a repeatable use card can be bonkers. If you have enough mana, you can get additional reanimation cards from just doing this. In our next section, we'll take a look at the best reprints from this deck. These are some of the cards that you're likely going to want to keep in the deck as you upgrade and tweak. Breach's Brazen Plunderer is a 3/3 Goblin Pirate with Menace. Whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to an opponent, exile the top card of each of those opponents' library, and then you may play those cards this turn and spend mana as though it was any color to cast those spells. This card is a great route to the theft strategy, as you can play lands and spells. And don't forget, we have a number of cards in the deck that are going to give us extra value for using someone else's spells. Captain Lannery Storm is a 2/2 for 3 mana with haste. Whenever she attacks, you create an untapped treasure token. Whenever you sacrifice a treasure, she gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. This captain can give us a ton of aggressive value early on, and can get large if we've used our treasure tokens for ramp. I'd say that given the wide amount of treasure production we have in this deck, this is one of the few non-green decks that actually manage fine without a lot of ramp package. Captivating Crew lets us pay 4 mana to gain control of a target creature an opponent controls until the end of turn. That creature untaps and gains haste. This is a great way to use our turn to basically remove the largest threats in play by making them join our crew. Dire Fleet Daredevil is a 2-drop with First Strike. When it enters the battlefield, you can exile target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast it this turn, and use mana of any type to cast it. If that card will be put into a graveyard, it gets exiled instead. This is great if your opponent has a powerful spell in their graveyard like a mass draw spell or a removal spell. One of the things I truly like about this deck is that we have cards that let you steal just about every kind of card from an opponent. We have cards that let you steal creatures, cards that let you steal spells like the Daredevil. This is truly a very flavorful deck. Fathom Fleet Captain is a token producer. For 2 mana, we can create a 2/2 pirate token with Menace. This is excellent to help us keep up blockers should we go all in on the attack. I also like that some of these have better abilities on the cheaper creatures. Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator, is my go-to for having a powerful pirate commander. Whenever an opponent is dealt damage by one or more of our pirates, we create a treasure token for each of the opponent's dealt damage. This is actually a CEDH level commander that I enjoy building, partnered with something that's in red like Dargo the Shipwrecker, who's also a pirate. See, this is a route to a very easily obtained infinite combo win, which you could in theory add to this deck, though it will be much less consistent given that we're not using the partner commanders in the command zone. If you have Malcolm out, along with Glinthorn Buccaneer, you can actually win on the spot. See, you'll activate the Buccaneer's ability while attacking to loot, and because you'll discard a card, each opponent gets dealt 1 damage. Malcolm's ability then triggers, giving you a treasure for all 3 of your opponents that you deal damage to, and as long as you've netted at least 2 treasures, you can, before the combat goes through, use the ability again, repeating this process until the game is over. This is a budget-friendly option that you are more than able to use, but I am not considering it to be an official part of my budget upgrades. Pitiless Plunderer is one of the 2 best reprints in the deck, being a mainstay in so many aristocrat decks. Getting treasure whenever a creature dies is a very powerful ability and can net you a ton of mana for just letting your creatures die. Lastly, the Black Market Connections is the other great reprint in this deck, letting you get an immense amount of value each turn. You get mana ramp through the treasures, card draw, and a creature for just a few life loss each. This also will be giving you tokens that are technically considered pirates, so keep that in mind when you're looking to create those shapeshifters. So now that we've looked at the cards in the deck, let's talk upgrades. Our goal is to refine the deck to your tastes and improve the deck's function while keeping it to $30 or less. Angrath, Captain of Chaos, is in here to give our creatures menace, which makes them incredibly difficult to block en masse. A lot of our creatures' abilities trigger when creatures deal combat damage to a player, making it much more likely some damage will be getting through, making this an excellent addition. Dread Return is one of my personal favorite reanimation spells. We can use it normally to reanimate a creature upon casting it from our hand, or we can use the flashback by simply sacrificing 3 creatures to use it while it's in the graveyard. We get a lot of reanimation from our commander, and having this as an additional resource means that we can get extra pirates back from the grave. Deadeye Tracker is a pirate from the original Ixalan set, and lets us use our opponent's graveyard as a resource to explore, which can net us card draw or help us set up our graveyard. Either way, it's pure value on a 1-drop that I wanted to take advantage of. Ruthless Knave is card draw, and it can be used as a sack outlet to provide us with more treasure tokens. We can always use more card draw, and with the amount of excess treasures that are going to be at our disposal, it's good to be able to use them for something more than just their mana. River Kelpie isn't a pirate, but it gives us card draw for playing things out of our graveyard. Specifically, it'll give us card draw whether we're playing cards from the graveyard or putting cards into play from the graveyard. And so having the distinction of casting from the graveyard versus reanimating is both covered. Cemetery Tampering has Hideaway 5, letting us look at the top 5 cards of our library, exiling 1 face down, and the rest go to the bottom of our library. Then at the beginning of our upkeep, we may mill 3 cards, and if there are 20 or more cards in our graveyard, we can cast the exiled card for free. This has a ton of value, and I'm looking more so for the mill engine. See, as a reanimator deck, our graveyard can function very much as an additional resource outlet. Think of it as a secondary hand. This gives great value to cards that can put more cards into our graveyards for cheap. Collector's Vault gives us card draw, and it lets us set up our graveyard, along with a treasure token. I want this value all the time, and nearly every deck I've built these days includes this card. Flayer of the Hatebound isn't a pirate, but we've made quite the deal with the devil for this piratey power. It has Undying, so should the Flayer die, it returns with a +1/+1 counter. Whether it or another creature enters the battlefield from the graveyard, that creature will deal damage equal to its power to any target. This is a great way to burn opponents whose reanimation targets hit the battlefield, and it can help you connect with additional opponents. Now, it wouldn't be an upgrade guide from Ixalan without the Forerunners of the Coalition, which lets us tutor a pirate to the top of our library. Whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under our control, each opponent loses 1 life. This is a great budget-friendly tutor and can get us some damage spread around. Lazav the Multifarious comes to us from Ravnica, but it lets us surveil 1. We can also pay the mana value of a creature in our graveyard to have Lazav become that creature indefinitely, but it maintains its name as Lazav and the ability to switch forms again. This will come into relevance if we reanimate a creature that he's emulating and that creature happens to be a legendary. Emberwild Captain lets us become the Monarch upon entering the battlefield, and then whenever an opponent attacks us while we're the Monarch, the Emberwild Captain will deal damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. This is such a mean card to retaliate against an aggressive player, and while I love the Monarch mechanic, putting a target on our head is something we need to defend against. With the Captain's ability though, the opponent might have to think twice before coming at us for that crown. Doom Whisperer is one of my favorite additions, being a 6/6 flying and trampling nightmare demon, quite literally. We can pay 2 life to surveil 2, which can then be used to mill ourselves 2 cards for 2 life. This is excellent setup to begin building up our graveyard, so when we begin reanimating, we have plenty of options to choose from. Lastly, Revel in Riches gives us an alternate win condition that relies on the treasure tokens that our deck likes to churn out. If at the beginning of our upkeep we have 10 or more treasures, we win the game. It also makes us a treasure whenever an opponent's creature dies. so 10 treasures should be pretty easy in this deck. I also want to note that this is probably the most expensive card that we've added to our budget upgrades, but given that this is so very much on flavor, and I think this is the only deck that didn't have an alternate win condition, I wanted to add it so that all 4 of the decks have some form of alternate win available. So these 13 cards will help remove some of the fluffier cards from the deck and refine it, giving you budget-friendly options to improve the deck's performance and start tailoring it to your specific playstyle. The goal of this deck is pretty simple. You assemble your crew of swashbucklers, you swing in and steal what you can, and should your creatures die, we can bring them back later on. So we can play somewhat recklessly with this deck without the fear of being blown out by some blockers. If you have other reanimation spells you'd like to use, such as Command the Dreadhorde or Living Death, you can certainly add them in. But at the end of the day, how you build the deck is entirely dependent on your tastes and preferences as the pilot. But let's turn the mic to you. What do you think of this deck? Are there cards that you'd recommend to folks wanting to tinkering with this? Let's discuss it in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit the like button as it really helps us navigate the algorithm, and if you're new here, remember to hit subscribe to never miss a video. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed your stay here, and as always, I'll see you all next video.